Everyone, it's Tuesday, September 13th, 2022. A hard weekend for me. A lot of mourning for people we lost, including my wife's best friend who died mysteriously in her sleep. And I usually don't editorialize, but I'm going to have to do so here. Just a couple notes about 9/11. So 9/11 is the litmus test for truthers or people interested in knowing the truth, the real truth, not just a narrative that seems plausible to you. And it's the litmus test for the truth. 9/11, whether you believe the grand narrative as it was, that terrorists brought down the World Trade Center, both buildings. And what most people don't know is that two buildings, the Twin Towers, fell. They know that. But the third building, Building 7, also fell. So if you know anything about physics, the likelihood of, regardless of the cause, that the likelihood that 3 modern skyscrapers collapsed at free fall speed into their own footprints on the same day is an anomaly that can't be explained. And you don't have to be a physics major to understand that. So if you do still believe that, I'm not saying there wasn't a terrorist attack, but what I am saying is that there is no way in hell that without explosives in the buildings, that these 3 buildings collapsed strictly by fire caused by getting hit by jet planes or whatever. So if you still believe the grand narrative that terrorists pulled off this attack that resulted in some of the worst freedom-limiting legislation in the world, in America's history, but really in the world, the Patriot Act and the Patriot Act 2 really undid the Fourth Amendment. And people don't realize that. And it also gave carte blanche to for this country, or in the West in particularly, to go around the world on a military campaign. But I must add once again and point to these fairly newly released photographs, and I'm showing one right here, of the World Trade Center collapse. And as you can see, there's debris being launched upward and outward, again, fighting the laws of physics. As one of the towers collapses, debris weighing hundreds of tons being launched upward and outward as the tower collapses. It's completely implausible. And as I said before, if you still believe in the narrative that this was unassisted in any way, these collapses were unassisted, just look at Building 7. It fell at 4 p.m. on 9/11/2001 in a complete implosion. The building imploded, wasn't hit by a plane, just by fires, imploded and collapsed into its own footprint and was never explained. So please look at Building 7. Look again at the physics of what happened in New York City on 9/11, not to mention the lack of evidence of an attack on the Pentagon by a jet airliner and what seems to be a missile attack on the Pentagon and not a jet airliner, because there's no proof thereof except some debris. And as was found in New York City on that day, they pointed at jet engines, and the same thing in the Pentagon, jet engines that didn't even belong to the supposed airliners that collided with the towers in the Pentagon. So please take another look at it, and let's get back to the news. All right, so today in the news, big story, credit card companies, American Express, MasterCard, and Visa are building a registry of firearm and ammunition purchases. And it was claimed by the NRA. Florida governor and Florida governors Ron DeSantis, his gubernatorial opponent, and Republican trader Charlie Crist calls DeSantis Satan and compares himself to Jesus. Also, wild speculation surrounds Trump as he arrives in D.C., while a special master is to be appointed, which could be a win for the former president. I'll be talking about these stories and more coming up right now. All right, so the first article up here is by Carrie Pickett from the Washington Times. Gun rights backers call credit card plan a step towards national gun registry, which is actually what it is. So Second Amendment advocacy organizations are blasting major credit card companies' plan to distinguish gun purchases and payment processors, saying it is a step towards a database of U.S. gun owners. Visa Incorporated announced over the weekend that it will begin to categorize gun sales at gun shops, joining MasterCard and American Express. Gun control advocates say the category will better track suspicious sales that could lead to mass shootings. I mean, what's suspicious about buying firearms? Visa said it would adopt the International Organization of Standardization's new merchant code for gun store sales. Until Friday, gun store sales were considered general merchandise. The National Rifle Association called the action a capitulation to gun control groups, which it is. This is from Newsweek. Federal law explicitly in the United States explicitly prohibits the creation of a federal firearm registry, and it requires that the National Instant Criminal Background Check System erase background check information within 24 hours of completion and that not keep a database. Yet in 2016, the Government Accountability Office called out the Obama administration for holding on to the data, and the Biden administration continues to compile digital records. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives has collected nearly 1 billion firearm purchase records from gun dealers who have gone out of business. The government now digitized the records of nearly 866 million transactions, including some 54 million from 2021 alone. This is a gun registry. What it is going to really, because everything that's done online, but it's going to associate purchase records that you make tied to particularly ammunition sales. So they're going to track and flag it as suspicious if you buy more than, and Democrats and anti-gun advocates, oh, what do you need 1,000 rounds for? Well, many of us who own firearms shoot 1,000 rounds quite frequently, not in one trip to the range, but maybe after a dozen trips to the range, we'll shoot more than 1,000 rounds. And so they will flag that as suspicious because, as we found out with firearms, that gun control advocates don't know anything about firearms, don't know anything about ammunition, and they continually spin the narrative that certain ammunition, including the President of the United States, certain ammunition is so dangerous, like the 9mm or even the .223 round is somehow more dangerous, when actually certain types of rounds can cause more damage, obviously, but they don't even make that distinction. They just said ammunition, certain types and certain amounts of ammunition is inherently dangerous. So we're going to move on to a little story here from CNN about the special master. Now, if people weren't up on the story, special master is going to be appointed, and the investigation at the of the documents that were seized at Mar-a-Lago by the FBI are going to be looked at by what is a independent arbiter to see if certain information was illegally seized and that shouldn't be investigated. The core issue here is whether attorney-client privilege is being violated by the FBI by taking, documents related to any cases that Trump might be facing. So the special master is an independent arbiter who's going to look at that. But the important thing here is that while the special master is being appointed, all investigation into the documents has to stop. So that is a win already. And apparently what the DOJ agreed to a special master put forward by the Trump team. And I'm just going to read from the CNN article. The Justice Department and former President Donald Trump's legal team have found rare agreement in a potential candidate to serve as a special master tasked with reviewing the documents seized from Mar-a-Lago. Judge Raymond Deary, who Trump's legal team put forward, is an acceptable option to serve as the third-party attorney to independently review the seized materials, the Justice Department said in court filings on Monday. So this could be a win for the Trump team. We'll see. It's a win anyway that they suspend the investigation, but it's going to be dragged out regardless, through the midterms as some sort of, this is obviously a political ploy. Now, moving along, we talked a little bit about this in the beginning, but Ron DeSantis's gubernatorial Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, is facing re-election this year. And his opponent, an ex-Republican, Charlie Crist, who is now a Democrat, is running against him. So in this article from Town Hall, Charlie Crist portrays himself as Jesus Christ against Satan in bizarre stump speech. Now, I'm quoting from the Town Hall article here. Some people call him Satan, Crist said. Have you heard that? He asked. Yes, comes a murmur from Crist's audience. I'm trying to be nice, Crist then claims. DeSantis versus that, he says while pointing to his name on one of the campaign signs posted on the wall behind him. A few in the audience said Christ in an apparent play on the Democrat candidate's name. Obviously, he's not Jesus Christ, and DeSantis is not Satan. DeSantis is actually trying to stand up to the giant wave of authoritarianism that the left is perpetuating in their fascist play at politics. Because it is really the Democrats and the corporations that are mounting an attack on freedoms of American citizens and political liberties. The Daily Caller reports something similar. Charlie Crist compares Governor Ron DeSantis to Satan and himself to Jesus Christ, and they write, the video, first shared by the Rapid Response Media Wing of the DeSantis gubernatorial re-election campaign, was from a Crist event on March 17, 2022, so it was far earlier this year. And, they go on to say already the things that I've said. Some people call him Satan. This is a terrible narrative. If people didn't know, Asatan in Hebrew means adversary. So it's not really, Satan isn't the name of the devil. We could get into that another time. It just means adversary. So you're calling him Satan. Well, DeSantis is in fact your adversary. But he's not the one people have to worry about because he's standing up for people's liberties. And that's the most important thing about living in America is you have certain liberties, particularly political liberties, that should not be violated if you want to live in a free country. So Mediaite reports Trump's surprise return to D.C. leads to wild blue check conspiracies, negotiated self-surrender to be arraigned. He's arriving in D.C. to discuss with his attorneys on the golf course certain things that he's afraid might be surveilled. So he doesn't want that to happen. And he discusses the appointment of the special master and his next legal moves against this really unwarranted attack ahead of his announcement of a presidential run for 2024. And despite being zero evidence that Trump's return to D.C. was unplanned or hurried, this didn't keep individuals on Twitter from speculating that not only was he in a rush to return, but that is clear evidence that he's about to turn himself in. The indictment isn't going to happen before the midterms, because then they would have to unveil the entire affidavit for the subpoena, which would show that there's little evidence that Trump did anything wrong or out of the ordinary that other presidents before him didn't do. I mean, all presidents have secured documents to make sure that the history of their president is not soiled by the archivists at the presidential archivists at the National Archives. All right, I want to go into a couple unrelated news here. This is the New York Magazine, and what they're trying to do, and another political ploy here, is now that it has been verified that the Hunter Biden laptop was real and all the evidence on the laptop as it was before the 2020 election corroborated by Tony Bobulinski, and we're not so much worried about Hunter's nefarious behavior, smoking crack and screwing underage girls, as much as there's evidence of a pay-for-play scheme with the then Vice President Joe Biden, who is now the asterisk president of the United States, that the New York Magazine is trying to say that this isn't as important as it seems. And so now they admitted that the evidence and the laptop is real. They're trying to undermine its weight as far as accusations of corruption go, because that's the real. It's like you don't have to take the Counselor on Foreign Relations speech. There's no context there you could change where Joe Biden says, you know, I told them if you want the billions of dollars, you better fire that prosecutor who happens to be looking into corruption into the company Burisma that my son sits on the board of. You have to fire that prosecutor, the corruption prosecutor that was, the corruption unit was actually put in place to secure money from the West as Ukraine changed sides from Russian influence to Western influence. And so Joe Biden in that video says you have to fire the prosecutor or you're not getting the money. Right there, that's corruption, because his son was on the board of Burisma at the time. So they're trying to undermine the even more evidence of corruption on the laptop. And so New York Magazine writes here in this article by Andrew Rice and Olivia Nuzzi, the first thing you need to understand about the Hunter Biden laptop, though, is it's not a laptop. It is a laptop, and there was evidence on a laptop. But they're trying to patronize you to tell you, when they talk about the Hunter Biden's laptop, it's not a laptop. Obviously, they're digital copies floating all over the place, but that doesn't undermine the evidence that's on there, because the evidence has not been questioned. The contents have not been questioned. Here, for the first time, the New York Magazine questions it. The first thing you need to understand about the Hunter Biden laptop, though, is not a laptop. The FBI reportedly took possession of the original, at least if you accept the version of events promoted by those who have distributed the data, which Hunter Biden and his lawyers don't. They don't dispute it. And we all have, and all we have now are copies of copies. When it first publicly surfaced 20 days before the 2020 election, the authenticity of the material was doubted to the degree that Twitter and Facebook effectively banned the story. It wasn't doubted to the degree, it just, they didn't want the evidence out there. And they didn't doubt it. They put the narrative forth that there was doubt that it was authentic. But the narrative was a lie. It was disinformation perpetuated by intelligence agencies who were against the Trump campaign. So they banned the story from legitimate political discourse. That is election interference. Since then, mainstream news organizations, including the New York Times and the Washington Post, have come to verify at least some of the information contained in the cache is authentic. So there's the mischaracterization. At least some of the information, they verified at least some of the information. They had to. But the fact is, the information corroborated already by Tony Bobulinski is that there was a pay-for-play scheme, and that indeed is corruption. Nice try, New York Magazine. But you're not going to undermine the story, because this, in fact, is when Donald Trump said he wanted to drain the swamp of corruption. That's exactly what he meant. And what did people do? People voted for corruption. If you voted for Joe Biden, you voted for corruption. And that's plain and simple. You should just look into his background being a front man for MBNA, which is a major credit card company, which is a bank. So that's not surprising at all. And to make matters even worse, this is from Fox News. Biden appoints ex-Clinton aide John Podesta as new climate advisor, sparking scathing social media reactions. Of course, because this wasn't a WikiLeaks thing. It wasn't Russian propaganda. The email leaks from the Gmail account of John Podesta pointed out that Hillary Clinton, in fact, was corrupt, and that John Podesta could very well be a pedophile because of some of the emails that were going back and forth from Podesta. And here they write, Twitter users voiced outrage after the Joe Biden White House announced Friday that former Clinton campaign manager and Obama counselor John Podesta will assume the role of senior advisor to the president for clean energy innovation and implementation. This guy is corrupt. The move elicited shock from conservative voices on Twitter, reinvigorating critiques of Podesta's leaked emails from 2016 WikiLeaks, it was WikiLeaks release, and pointing to alleged corruption within the Biden administration. The thing is with these emails, this is why Seth Rich died, is because somebody downloaded onto a thumb drive John Podesta's emails. And it looked like it was done at the DNC campaign headquarters, and Seth Rich was killed over it. Corruption 101 tweeted a former Texas House candidate, Patrick McGinnis, Clinton crony, and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And so I'm not going to go into the whole article. You know that this guy is corrupt, and he could very well be a pedophile. Look back at the emails if you so desire, if you don't quite believe me. But this is indeed the case with John Podesta. All right, that's it today. Rudy's Revelation. Coming up later this afternoon, episode 8 of Tuesdays with Perry. So check that out. Also, like, subscribe, and follow and share. Comment down below. Let me know what you think about 9/11. There's a lot of stuff to discuss in terms of that. Please don't believe the narrative that this happened by 12 hijackers, that some of which turned up to be alive. And follow me on social media, Truth Social, Get Our Minds, Facebook, Twitter. We'll see you tomorrow.